Special Education Advisory Committee meeting Thursday, January 8th, 2026. We'll start off with the land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have longstanding relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas, Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississaugan peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, live, and learn. Okay, we have regrets tonight from the Centre Neb, Oxford, Ontario, Elizabeth Daniel, Learning Disabilities Association of Durham Region, Charmaine Brown, Ontario Parents of Visually Impaired Children, and Jennifer McLaughlin of Savannah Afrocentric Circle of School Boards. And we will start the roll call. Kelly, Durham Johnson Association. Trustee Ajax. Don Edwards, trustee for Ajax. Jessica Wells, member at large. Erin Marie Bellin, representative of Durham District School Board. Allison Amer, Easter Seals, Ontario.
From Shauna Haley, the Grandview Kids Family Advisory Committee.
Lindsay Clay, secondary DSA rep.
Connor Jenkinson, assistant lead principal and student services. Joe Wrigley, system lead inclusive.
Nancy Adams, system lead inclusive student services.
Steve Hinton, trustee Pickering.
Lisa Rye, reporting secretary.
Warren List, superintendent of inclusive education.
Even Kyriakides Association, Bright Children, and SEAC chair. I'd like to welcome our guests online who are viewing with us tonight. We will move on then to the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any questions or concerns with respect to the agenda as it's presented? There's no concerns or questions. We have a motion to approve. Donna? Any seconders? Allison, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. Moving on to the approval of the minutes from December 4th, 2025. There's a couple of corrections. Page 2, number 6, it states the minutes of November 6th, I think 2026 in the original minutes, and it's 2025 minutes. Page 9. Page 9. Again, the year corrected for our next SEAC meeting from then. It was said 2025, it is 2026. And then the seconded by Elizabeth Daniel is adding her last name of Daniel. Okay, has everybody had a chance to review those minutes? Does anybody have any questions or concerns with respect to those? Okay, can we get a motion to pass the minutes then? Approve the minutes? Revising. The revised, yeah, the review, absolute revised minutes, yes. Yeah, seconders? Allison, all in favor? Motion passed. Okay, moving on then to our staff report regarding the 26-27 class planning updates.
Right. Well, thank you. As for that, yes, our special education class placement planning, we are well into it at this point. Definitely teams have been looking across basically with a few of our areas starting a little bit earlier, as we do have 4 schools that will be opening this year. We have 2 in West Whitby and 1 in North Oshawa as an elementary. All 3 of those are elementary, and North Oshawa Secondary School, which will be opening as well in September. So that's taken us through quite a bit of looking at where we are trying to always make sure that students are going as close as they can to their home communities and within their home communities where we can. I often refer to it as the playground effect and that playground dynamic, where students can be at the community playground and they can see their classmates, they can see their schoolmates, they can see the communities. I think there's something important about that and being able to be around peers whenever we look at that. So we continue to be able to work through that process as we look and review, and we take a look to see what classes are going to be remaining as open. We look at any spaces where we do need to open up any new classes and we look at a space where we need to move or we need to close classes at that point. And that's due to things like enrollment and where we do see those trends. We always work on a trends-based model where we're trying to predict as much as we can. We used to say we're looking at a 5-year prediction and trying to really get ahead of it. With the way Durham is growing and DDSB is growing, we tend to say right now kind of around that 3-year prediction where we're trying to go, just because it's a little more realistic than trying to sit with that kind of 5-year mark for us at this point. But we still always look at that point of longevity as we're into it. So wanted to just again talk about some of the kind of ongoing components to it around. I said we always look for that local homeschool and trying to be as close as possible and as close as possible when those classroom placements are. We also want to highlight that we are still within the review process of our deaf and hard of hearing program, and that process is ongoing and continuing with our external research group and our external research partners. We also want to be able to discuss the fact that we do have some pressures that we are looking at. We've talked about some of the considerations around gifted screening and where that was looking at with some of those SEAC results, and the fact that we had a very robust conversation at our last SEAC meeting around that. So just highlighting that as one of those considerations that we are looking at as well. And again, appreciation to all those who are engaging in some of those listening and learning sessions that I know that Joe and team are leading as well. I want to highlight a few of those kind of ongoing trends as we go through, because the trends we want to highlight, then talk about the actual process as we move forward, because the trends are that we still can see some very high pressures, municipality pressures around Oshawa. Oshawa is a very rapidly growing area. And we do tend to see that. We anticipate being able to alleviate some of those secondary pressures, which were very, very, very felt across our secondary schools with the opening of North Oshawa Secondary. But we still see some pretty, if we were looking at it almost as a heat map, kind of those more intensive areas around some of the where students are clustered around certain schools as well. Again, we look at that as part of our planning. So we do also want to be able to highlight the fact that we do have an increased area within Oshawa complex care homes who are looking to be either in district or who have opened up within space. Complex care residential, where it's living treatment-based facilities, are complex care homes, and within that they have usually anywhere from 2 to 4 students, sometimes up to 6 students who are residing within that as well. We've had many different reach outs throughout the first semester around that. And we continue to work with them around what is most appropriate for us and how we look at all those considerations. We also want to highlight the fact that Westwood, we still see increased rolling pressures there. But hopefully with our 2 new schools opening, we're going to be able to level out a little bit in a few different areas in terms of some of those pressures. But as we did with Josiah Henson and with Trillium Woods, we always look to see as part of that commitment to the home community, where we have that opportunity to open up a classroom in a home environment where we have students who may be part of that home catchment, and we want to then look and say, we have a certain number of students as part of that. Well, would it make sense in that particular circumstance to open up a classroom, to move a class from one site where we may be busing them from quite a distance to be able to accommodate in the current to at the site? So those are all the things that we look at when we look at any of our schools that are opening as well. When we think about some of our ongoing considerations around the process, we are always aligned with our staffing timelines. We can't step outside of our staffing timelines just because those are got to be bargained. Those are things we need to be following in terms of our processes. So as we look at this, because there are staffing limitations with any sort of opening or move or closing a classroom, we always align with our staffing considerations, which is why, again, if you've been with SEAC for a little bit of time, it follows a fairly regular, I would say, kind of timeline. You will see it around the same times when we start to do that. So as for SEAC, we will continue to bring you updates as we work through the processes, as we continue to look at all the analysis process system. And again, we look forward to being able to bring you what some of those considerations are.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? John?
Yeah, and it comes down to, the number of, students who require basically small class placements. I know that we've been a little bit, somewhat steady, up and down with the classrooms or a little bit. I'm just wondering, when you mentioned that, like, are you seeing really probably an increase of a few classrooms sort of at this point in time?
So through you, Chair.
Yes.
I'll say, I don't know if we can make that prediction yet in terms of it. I will say that across the system, as I think a lot of our GTA boards are feeling, there is that increase in complex care in terms of, look at some of those more intensive supports, and does it always justify a special education class placement? Maybe not, maybe yes. And I think that's where that whole differentiation is always important, and why we look at that. And going even from that 5-year almost predictive model to that 3-year prediction, and trying to make, hopefully, get as close as we can to being able to get everything where we need it to be.
One other comment I made, Chair. There's a huge concern too, as you know, when it comes to, as I said, we have contractual obligations that have to be completed really by March, the end of March. Yet the House isn't coming back to sit until March 23rd. So therefore, we know we're not going to have a budget again to deal with this stuff, and it's huge. And plus the fact that they did not do the education consultation that they normally did, they put on that on hold. I have huge concerns when it comes to what's going to happen next, because as you said, there's more complex care needs in most, it is, across the province, we're feeling the pressure. And we know that special education hasn't been funded, but it's just the timing as well. It makes it very difficult, I know, for board to plan. But also, when it comes to the budget process, we have no idea what's going to happen. I know they did the provincial budget consultation started just before Christmas, and there's a couple, but you get on your piece. But that's also a comment that I would make, is that I think that we're due next week for budget consultations, province budget education, whether SEAC would really want to make a written letter about timing, but this is really crucial this year, and not I would say that again about funding, because we've got contractual obligations as well to meet our students, and we can't plan well, or staff can't plan well to support the needs that are coming in. When you have to already deal with contracting, you don't want to overstaff because it creates, financial issues. We can't overstaff because it creates, financial issues. We've been caught in that boat because we don't have the money in a reserve to cover it, really. And so it has just a domino effect, right? So it's just something that you might want to consider, but unfortunately, get a letter in. As I said, I think it's next week where the deadline for letters and feedback, or individual associations could do it, right? You could comment on doing to it.
Shauna?
Thanks. I just wanted to ask for some clarification, because I know I've heard this over the past year or so from a few families. As you're talking about just some classes moving around or possibly opening up. Is there a plan for our primary students? Because my understanding has been that it's more like primary junior type classes for the small class placements, and then separate intermediate classes. And then families with primary students who are looking for a small class placement are kind of being dissuaded or pushed away from seeking that out because of the possibility of having older students in the class, making it less appropriate for their students. So I'm wondering if there are primary specific classes, if there's a plan for that, and what that might look like for families.
So, through you, Chair.
Okay.
So we don't have any specific primary designated classrooms here, correct, in the sense that we do have primary junior and we have junior and junior. So they're both kind of in that. Again, trying to be able to make sure we're hitting a wide range where we can, and also recognizing that we want to be able, we know regular class and breast more most like we understand have lots of conversation around the table around that as well, but they'll just answer specifically around primary. Our model is primary junior when we are looking at something for that junior maybe. Yeah, we don't really be very specific grades sometimes. The way that the enrollment will be, sometimes we do get a lot more of one grade versus another, or one division versus another. But that comes in on a yearly basis, or it can change.
I think what's interesting, just
Yes.
Shauna, what's interesting too is to think when we place students, when you think about a family school's catchment, imagine that this is the boundary that we collect from. We only, those students in that space come to this school. So sometimes when you think of it that way, if you only had a primary class, what if there wasn't enough primary kids in that little catchment? So it really needs to be responsive to the kids. What are the needs of the students in that family school area? And we need to be responsive to that.
Okay. I guess the concern I'm bringing forward for families is like what happens then if they're in an area where it's mostly junior age students in grade 5 and 6, and they might have a child in grade 1, if they feel like their needs aren't being met in a regular class. How are we as a board like accommodating that child's need or the parent's desire for a small class placement for their child?
So thinking that our placement decisions aren't based on best grade fit. Like we don't look at a class and go, well, this is mostly threes. We're just going to put like about what are the needs of the student in that catchment area. So sometimes the grades within a class will change and shift depending on the needs of the student. So it needs to be responsive to what the needs are in that catchment area. And that's when we make those decisions.
Any other questions? Okay. So then we're going to move on to the board report.
So for the board report, we had a standing committee meeting this Monday, where we received a presentation around empowering excellence, and the focus was from principal and teachers and students from Village Union Public School. There was a short video that illustrated the impact of empowering excellence on the school culture and student belonging and well-being. There were 2 students from Village Union who shared their lived experiences, who spoke really powerfully and valued the identity affirming and strength-based learning environment that was created within school for empowering excellence. Just a bit about empowering excellence, it reimagines schools as spaces where every student's identity is affirmed, strengths are centered, and lived experiences have shaped learning conditions. And it's grounded in Indigenous and human rights frameworks, anti-oppression and universal design for learning. And the strategy focuses on removing systemic barriers while fostering student brilliance, dignity, joy, and hope. The strategy is organized around 6 interconnected priorities: prioritizing well-being, inspiring excellence through high expectation, building staff efficacy, empowering student agency and leadership, strengthening caregiving partnerships, and building strong community hubs. They spoke about the selection process being for a thoughtful and data-informed approach. And that includes aligning with the DDSB human rights, anti-discrimination, anti-racism in Indigenous education policies, and through the 3-year rolling Ontario Marginalization Index, and the data cross-reference with student volume. Then we moved on to the information items, so through the student trustee updates. So they provided updates across 3 focus areas. So they spoke about Ignite Learning, where they spoke about the monthly student senate meetings that were held on November 6th and December the 4th, where students engaged in working groups, regional discussion, and policy-focused activities. And that included building the ideal classroom to inform the new teaching and learning policy. And there was attendance at the OSTAACO Board General Meeting, November 13th through 16th, which supported collaboration, advocacy learning, and provincial connection. The next item was Ignite Connection, and they spoke about the virtual student trustee information session being held for the upcoming election. And then we spoke about the Local Student Senate Leadership Award, and that we received 48 applications and reviewed, and 2 projects were selected. One from J. Clark Richardson, which was Together We Belong, and then from Colonel J. Farewell Public School, and that was called the Connection Crew. And they also started to spoke about continuing the work for student engagement through social media, and sharing highlights. And then the last pillar was the Ignite Wellbeing. So they spoke about the board governance during the organizational meeting and how that was supported through the new student trustee mentor, Shailene Panella, participated in professional learning with possibility seats focused on consent education and safe school communities. Student trustees will also again be hosting additional information sessions regarding the role of student trustees for those who are interested in that role. And then we had an Obster update, and done one of that spoke about these one, and that's risen until March 23rd. And we're expecting more clarity around the role of trustees around this time. And then an update that the Public Education Symposium is scheduled for this January 23rd, 24th. The IDNF updates spoke about the new members, being Alison Hector Alexander and that very own Lisa Bianca. The chair is Stephen Hanaby, vice chair is Jay Chan. Spoke about the drives across the holidays, organized through IDLF. And there was a video that highlighted the Santa Claus initiative at Dunbarton High School. Over the holidays, they shared some really exciting news around 529 individuals who were supported, $30,600 in gift cards collected, and $23,000 worth of food donated, as well as over 150 winter coats and supplies distributed. And there is going to be a partnership with Curtis Carmichael, who was successful in Ontario Training Foundation Initiative to provide mentorship and lived experience to some students at the schools. And then for our memos and key notes, we spoke a bit about 2024-2025 EQAO results, and noted that there were fewer than 50% of which 6 students who are making the provincial standards, and flagged my concerns around that. And then finally, there's spoke a bit about the single track French immersion enrollments, and with requests around the Oxbridge community and the Ajax communities, later questions around how this was going to be communicated. And there was a commitment that was reaffirmed to work collaboratively with school communities, via clarity and updates in DDSB's direction.
Okay, do we have any questions with respect to the board report? Moving on then to the business arising from the minutes. We have, oh, sorry, you're right. That was the presentation on assistive technology. Is next. Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Okay. Have some.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, that's it.
I'll just do some through chair quick introductions. Joining us here, we have Caroline Mills and Carolyn Wilson. And can you give me a quick instructional
Inclusive technology facilities.
inclusive technology facilitators? Thank you. So we asked them to join us today to share a little bit of hot topic upcoming, what's new in assistive technology, and things that they've been working on here to support our students in classrooms. So I'll turn it over to them. As long as you're ready, don't rush. We are.
We already, thanks for inviting us into joining.
I'm just gonna ask favor from the first though.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I did try to pass through, but it didn't. Don't go off my heart. So I'll just start. So I'm Carolyn Wilson, Caroline knows. And as inclusive technology facilitators, we work with the inclusive technology planners to make sure that students within the board know what tools are available to help them with their learning. And so it's a really exciting time for inclusive technology. And one of the most exciting, so our plan today is to show you what's really exciting in inclusive technology right now, what the trends are. And one of the most exciting things about it is that inclusive technology is built into devices. Back in the day, it used to be that if you wanted word prediction on a device, you had to pay for WordQueue, which was the standalone software. Or if you wanted dictation, you had to pay for Dragon. And if you wanted something read aloud, you paid for Kurzweil. And now those features are built right into devices. As well, things like face control and live captioning used to require additional devices, and now they're built right into devices. So our DDSB Chromebooks and iPads have all of those features built in, as well as a menu of more than 30 accessibility tools. So I'm quickly just going to tap over here just so you can see it. This is a Chromebook displayed on, and if I tap the time on the Chromebook, and then tap accessibility, you can see the menu of tools that are available to students. At the top, there are two select speak and dictation. Those are turned on for all students, even if they don't want them. They're there, they can't turn them off. So because there are so many amazing tools on these devices, and they're used by so many different students, when we go into classrooms, we often use the elevator analogy to describe them. And the reason we use the elevator is because some people need the elevator to get to the second floor. A wheelchair user would need the elevator. The same way that there are students that need these tools. Every single tool was built with a need in mind. However, these tools are also awesome for a whole variety of learners. And so there are students that just like them. For example, a student who is likes to learn through audio. They can have text read aloud to them instead of having to read it themselves by using select to speak. And similar to someone, for example, our courier department who take boxes to every floor every day, they prefer to use the elevator. And then there's the situational user. I'm using Caroline as my example because she prefers the elevator to the stairs every day and make her take the stairs. But there are students that only use these tools occasionally. Like maybe a student's tired one day, doesn't have it in them to do the typing. They can turn on dictation and type using their voice. So there's a whole range of tools used by a whole variety of students, and it's no longer the student VIP that stands out for using the tools. Everybody's using them all the time. And in a DDSB classroom, everybody's screen looks a little bit different because everybody is customizing their own elevator.
Okay, adaptive supports. Adaptive supports are tools that automatically adjust to fit the learner's needs in real time. So these tools are becoming a game changer for a lot of our students. And they're moving away from like the fixed accommodation, the teacher driven and teacher directed, putting more of that control in hands of students, and also AI driven support in a lot of cases. So they can actually make the tool fit their needs, not the other way around. So I'm just going to talk about a few of these. So here's a few that you'll see in our classrooms. Firstly, we have text to speech. We've mentioned a little bit. Where students don't just listen, they can choose the voice, the speed, the language to match their needs. Word prediction has also become way more intuitive using predictive AI. It now learns the student's writing style and will even like suggest their next words more intuitively to keep their ideas flowing and reduce a lot of that spelling and writing anxiety you see. Simplify is a great tool. So this is more for web articles that can be very busy and distracting, pictures and ads. So they can use the Simplify tool through the Google Rewrite toolbar, and it will remove a lot of the distractions and then also give them the ability to simplify. We also have Orbit Notes, which helps make PDFs more accessible, and it's greatly improved even recently than a few years ago. I remember COVID days wasn't so necessarily accessible for all, and there's a lot more ability now to customize the tools within that feature. We also have Translate and Dictation, and they really are harnessing the advancements in our speech recognition AI, taking away that barrier of the keyboard so students can say it, then they can write it straight away. Also, the translation tool has greatly improved again, and it keeps our multi-language learners connected, bridging those gaps in the language. And lastly, we're just going to demo, as I'm saying, it's about Reader Mode. Reader Mode in Safari and Google. Again, it's another tool that's fantastic when students are navigating online websites, which is happening obviously a lot, removing the clutter, and they're then able to change the background color and font to reduce eye strain and help to create a more calm, focused environment for reading and deeper research.
I'm showing it on a recipe because this is one of my favorite ways to use it. However, it reduces visual clutter in an amazing way for students. So to find reading mode, it is sort of hidden in Chrome, but you tap the three dots and you go to more tools, and it's right there, it says reading mode, and it opens the same page in an uncluttered format, and students have the ability to listen to it, change the speed, change the voice. I actually don't know what that one is. Remove links, they can change the text. This one they can change the font. There's a whole menu of fonts. They can even change their color. So if they prefer black on a yellow background, they can do that. They can change the spacing and as well as change the spread. So this is available on both iPads and your iPhone. So if you are one of those people that cook in the kitchen that like to have your recipe up on an iPad or iPhone, if you tap in the browser bar, there's a little rectangle with lines in it. If you tap that, you can select reader mode, and it will open your screen like that. So not only is AI making a difference for accessibility tools, but it's also making a huge difference in how students can access their devices. So a long time ago, if you wanted to use eye tracking, not a long time ago, if you wanted to use eye tracking to work a device, you required an additional eye tracking bar, which costs thousands of dollars. But now it's built into both, well, not quite the Chromebook yet, but the iPad and your iPhone, both have eye tracking on them. And this allows students to move the mouse around the screen using their pupils. And to do a click, you just stare at one spot and it will select it for you. Now this is not perfect yet, so we do have students using eye gaze that still use the bar under their device, but it's not long before this will improve because they're based on AI, like it trains itself to get better, and it's just going to get better and better. The Chromebook does have face control, which is students love to play with that feature. So if you have a Chromebook at home, open it up, turn it on, and we can try it after if you'd like. So students can move the mouse using head movements, and then have the different things happen, like a right click, left click based on facial gestures. So Caroline,
You can wink and it will press the cursor.
right now, Caroline is set up to, you can move your head to move the mouse, but then you show your teeth to click. There's also voice control built into our iPads now. So you can operate your iPad completely with your voice without touching the screen. And different vocalization sounds will do different things based on how you set them up. You can even set up a whole series of actions with one global sound. So that's through, if you've ever used shortcuts on your device, you can set a series of things to happen using shortcuts based on one thing you do. And so a student can just say, and then it will do everything that they've asked it to do. iPads also have now built-in multi-sensory feedback. So if a student's listening to music, it will vibrate to the beat of the music. And new, we just learned this week, live captions on a Chromebook. If you're using Chromebox, live captions will send the live captions to a Braille device, which will translate to Braille, so the student can read the Braille in real time. No, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Incredible. There was already a lot of Switch accessible software, but now there's so much more because it's so easy to create. So Switch accessible software has just blown up right now. And then the other thing that's sort of gone in the opposite direction, but is so good for so many students, is assistive access. So assistive access is an easier way to access your iPad or iPhone. And I'm just very quickly going to show you on my iPhone. If you have a child at home that you give your phone or iPad to, and you don't want them accessing your banking app, then in accessibility, you might be familiar with guided access where you can lock them into something so they can't leave it. But in accessibility, last year with iOS 18, they launched something called assistive access. This is at the bottom of the menu. And you set up what apps you want available. And it's also amazing for seniors. And when you start assistive access, it takes a second to switch over. Usually it's quite quick, not this slow.
It's real looking.
Yeah. And then only the apps you select are available on the device. And they're available in a slightly more simplified view, which you can set however you'd like. But you can see my camera options are photo or selfie. Those are the only options. So I don't have Zoom, I don't have all the other features. This is a simplified view. It's also how I had my mother-in-law's set up. So assistive access is a great tool if you have young children at home or older users in your life who aren't tech savvy and get overwhelmed by the iPad or iPhone. It's a great way to set it up.
So many students struggle in the area of executive functioning. So technology is really advancing. I know that's a shame. I'm strong about everything. Technology is really advancing and helping our learners stay organized. I'm going to show you a few of the tools that are becoming more and more amazing and intuitive for our students. We're moving away from the paper pencil planner agenda style organization tools to the digital ones like Google Keep, Calendar, and Tasks. So Keep has been a lifesaver for me. It's amazing. So, and this is accessible for all students through the Google apps. And through Keep, they're able to capture ideas, take notes, write to-do lists. One of the things I love about it is you can share collaborators to those notes. So we have like lists that we can then interact with, and students are able to do that as well, which is a fantastic feature for collaborative projects and assignments. It's very, very user friendly. As I said, it's a digital way of post-it note kind of feature to help students stay organized. Google Calendar is another example, which is more of a time management organization, which allows students to keep track of their schedules, deadlines, dates, events, help them break down big assignments to small steps, visualize their week, and it also syncs with all the assignments that teachers post through the Google Classroom forum. Another huge way that we are utilizing technology is in the area of self-regulation for supporting our learners. For example, visual schedules and timers. There's a lot of wonderful digital options now for our students, digital apps and such, which are just more flexible, more transportable, and also often able to change in the moment needed. Right? Also for self-regulation, like sensory breaks. For certain students, there's a lot of digital options now, like breathing apps, sensory breaks that allow them to kind of reset people to get back onto their schedule and tasks. And I say for many of our students, this is more engaging. And we're moving, they're not just tools, we're moving towards like building these critical life skills to foster independence of students as they move on in their classrooms.
So AI is making things really exciting, and the entire landscape of accessibility is changing very rapidly. these two tools, they're just three examples of tools that when I started this role just over 3 years ago, they didn't exist. Or not in the same way at all that they do now. So Google Lens allows you to take an image, upload it, and it will describe the image in detail, as well as research more information about the image. So a student can take a picture of their whiteboard, a diagram, anything the teachers put out in the room, pop it into Google Lens, it opens up a whole world about whatever it is you pop in. If you ever use the plant snaps to determine what the plant was in when we're out walking, you don't need to do that anymore. Just use Google Lens. It does it too. If you're watching a TV show and you think, hey, I like that woman's sweater, take a photo. Google Lens will find it for you and you can order it. Dictation tools, I've done that. Dictation tools also are getting better and better. So it used to be that our dictation tools, you had to have very clear speech to use them. And if you didn't, then you either couldn't use them or we had to look for something else for you. But now dictation tools with the built-in AI are beginning to recognize students' speech patterns. And that's only going to improve dramatically over the next little while. The Apple Magnifier app is one that a lot of people don't even know what it does. It's on your phone, it's on your iPad if you have an Apple device. It doesn't just magnify things, it has something in it called detection mode, and it identifies the world around you. Let me show them.
Okay, I'm very excited. It's a very quick demo.
It's pretty,
Yeah.
And so for a student who is low vision or blind, it can be life altering, but for those of us who require reading glasses, it helps in the grocery store because it will read the can label for you. Now, just as a word of warning, I do have this set up to identify images. It's already trying to tell me what I can see. So it's describing what it sees through the camera. So it's describing what it sees, reading any text it sees, and describing any person that's in it. So I'll just point it over. Actually, maybe I'll point it at the copy. It's awesome. Yes. Yes. Cool. This is
All representatives saw current a black object on a wooden surface. NS Tony Hall a coffee machine next to a group of 66,421,008. Networker or tap register sign. Classic 10 drawer cabinot deficit. Calendar use under license by Networker. Shows license for active teams. Party skim mill. Vitamin A payment. 2. Lal Patellar day sign. Puna tail D. Nay. Vitamin D, Tamin Zeta.
So now it has pointing stick on, and this is really quite interesting.
And detected. DSAA. Oh, now 1,188. Nutrition facts. Bob. Nutrition facts. That nutrition record. Low hands and highs.
It reads wherever your finger points. If you can't read something, you point under it. It will read what you're doing. And so it's really accurate, and you can actually set it so that it knows people. So if you train it to know who different people in your life are, you can have it identify people as they walk in the door.
Could I share an aside with
Absolutely.
to this technology? So one of the joys in my portfolio is I work with students who are blind. And I was watching one of our teachers of the blind low vision navigate a space at St. Clair with their student. And every day he brings his iPad and he checks out the cafeteria menu using this app. So like, oh, he's here you go, mashed potatoes and gravy. And so he goes, Mrs. Adams, if you don't mind, I'd like to know more about what you look like. And I'm like, okay. So he brings it. There, a woman standing, medium light hair, glasses, and I'm like, oh boy, what else is it gonna say?
Yeah.
But it was fascinating.
It does not seem to guess age, which is
No, yes, yes.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I was just blown away.
It is
and how there he was picking up what he was gonna have for lunch.
If you don't, oddly, this also works on Apple devices, but there is an app called Seeing AI, which is Microsoft, which does the same thing. So if you don't have an Apple device and wanted to try it, So AI has made so many changes to accessibility, but one of the greatest changes is what it can do for an educator. And it's so new that a lot of educators don't even know all of the possibilities yet. But this is just a list that we came up with of what AI can do to support a teacher when differentiating in the classroom. So leveling reading materials, like this is at the click of a button. Generating social stories, breaking down tasks into smaller tasks, creating decodable books, coming up with visuals for schedules that maybe they're missing from the visuals they have. Support for writing IEP goals, personalizing materials to match interests, summarizing a document, like something that's longer and a student needs a shorter version, preparing practice activities at varying levels, creating choices for content assessment and demonstration. And so, for example, if a student last year needed content in an audio format, the only way they could get that was using a read aloud button. Now, a teacher at the click of a button can upload their PDF, and Notebook LM is actually the AI that will generate a 2-person podcast that is animated and engaging for the student to listen to.
So real.
Like we did
And based on just what you put it in, right? It's not going to then go make up things on it.
Yeah, it's
what
just
you put in.
based on what you dropped into it. We dropped something into it thinking we might do a podcast, and then we were like, why would we ever do a podcast? They are way better than we should. But yeah, it is amazing what AI can do now, and we can't wait to see what happens next.
Question.
And that was yes.
This may sound slightly, I guess, maybe naive or old school, but from the lens of some of these assistive technologies, what is the potential impact on literacy? Like my concern is, how do we teach kids to spell well if we have tools that are just going to do it for them? But does that impact that learning to be able to be a good speller and a good reader on their own without the devices? Like how much reliance are we building in with the expansion and accessibility of those tools? Like, does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, I would say I don't know the research on this, but from my personal experience, we've always been spelled, right? So students can always misspell things and have it spelled correctly. We've had word prediction built into reading right for a long time. Students have been using it. I always feel like the more students sees a word spelled correctly, the more likely they are to spell it correctly. So if they have difficulty spelling, and we're talking in the writing process, not like practicing spelling, but in the writing process, if they have difficulty spelling a word, having it ready keeps the speed going. You know what I mean? They don't lose their thought. They're not lost in trying to figure out how to spell. And if it does correct it, and then they reread their writing, they're seeing that word spelled correctly, rather than seeing it spelled wrong and having the teacher pass it in.
yeah, I guess I've done some recently, relatively recently, especially around the function of AI as well, and potential impacts of AI generating more thoughts for you, and those sorts of things, and part of learning of being able to put together, information and articulate your thoughts properly. So this, like for me, I have more than 2 decades of trying to be able to have conversation and have an interactive discussion and put my thought together. But that's because I have a heck of a ton of practice doing it, where I've been forced to do it. I didn't have something be able to create those thoughts for me. So how do we balance that, where that learning actually becomes ingrained as part of who you are versus I gotta rely on my technology? It's I'm worrying with it. It's fantastic because it gives access and tools for kids to that, and then you can take the easy through that. And how do we balance that for our kids?
You want to go and then sure. Before I was in this role, I was in my previous portfolio was we created the guidelines for assistive technology for the system. And I think our teachers do an exceptional job of ensuring that AI doesn't replace the learning, but it enhances the learning. And so what we're doing in classrooms is really ensuring that foundational learning, creative thinking, all of those conversation pieces with students, those are things that are still happening. Teachers are doing a good job of ensuring kids are still writing. They have to create their own content. But what they're doing is, what's fantastic is AI really helps kids find the content. Then they develop their own ideas, or it gives them access to information they didn't have before so quickly. I think about probably one of the things for me that was just, as an educator, when I was an educator, one of the hardest things to do was to find a passage that for your class to read, and then be able to provide everyone in the class with a resource at their just right level. It was almost impossible to get. Like, you had to hand a student, well, here's a book for you, and it would look different than the other books and the other students. But what AI can do now is you take the same passage for every student and you ask it to simplify this text. And now you've created something that kids can't really see the difference between. The content is the same, but this is just a little bit simplified, which allows us to really look at the principles of universal design for learning and really embed that easily into the work. So I think it's a great question, but right in our guidelines, it's very clear that it cannot replace the learning, but simply an enhancement tool. And that we're explicitly teaching that in classrooms, and that's the work we're doing around professional development staff as well.
Thank you. Just along with that, I know in classrooms right now, we had discussions about this just in the office today, using AI as part of the writing process, and how teachers are teaching students to come up with their own ideas. And then if they're stuck or there's something they don't understand, they can use the AI to support it. But it's more as a supportive towards the writing process, not doing the writing work. Yes.
Yeah. Oh. Okay, we'll go around the table like this. Go ahead.
Thank you. So great presentation, but I'm also almost overwhelmed by the amount of information and how useful it could be. So kind of a two-pronged question is the transference of this information to parents, right? Because, you know, as you was talking about, I tell my wife, like, we only want YouTube Kids on my son's phone, right? So, so how do we, or what is the method or strategy to transfer some of that information to parents? And then my second prompt question is, you know, there's a lot of Apple products. Android users, and Android took over Apple as the number one. So what is do we have the equivalent of, like, I know you mentioned Microsoft as one, but are there equivalents of like some of those tools through Android?
So I'll be honest in saying that the tools that I spoke about were either Apple or Chrome, because that's what our students use.
Right.
So yes, and Microsoft actually excels at accessibility as well.
Okay.
So almost everything we talked about is available through Microsoft.
Okay.
What was the other?
And
Sharing. In our slideshow, we have a slide that we tried to push slide.
Yeah, we were worried we're gonna take way too long and you'll be like, we wanna go hard.
How we,
I think that's it.
if you don't mind.
So I mean, yes, I can talk a little bit and then I'll let me know if I forget anything. But we do have a multi-state approach to make sure educators know what's coming, what's new.
No, parents. Did you say
Parents or educators?
Oh, sorry,
Educators.
No.
we do have that ready as well, yeah.
It's okay, Connor, I've got it on my screen if we don't. I can just stick to it. So every student on the board who receives a SEAC device, first of all, meets with the inclusive technology trainer who helps them set up their devices tailored to them specifically. Parents are invited. So if your child has a special education device, parents are invited to that initial setup. And then the school certs, we regularly send information or meet with school certs to teach them about what's going on. So that should be the parents' first point of contact. And if they have any questions around what's on their child's IP for supportive technology, we participate in parent engagement opportunities. So the Control Alt Educate event that happened in November, we ran a session in the SEAC it was so much fun. We had all the different stations set up with different accessibility tools. The Special Education Parent Symposium that's coming up on February 10th, we'll be participating in that session. And then the Innovative Ed Department is having another parent engagement event in May, which is completely ISS accessibility technology focused. That's on May 20th. We don't have any other details of it right now, so it's on the 20th. And then we also have our inclusive technology supports webpage, which is attached to the DDSB webpage.
Thank you. Done?
Thank you. I have two questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
The first one was, like obviously great presentation. It's great to see all of this stuff. How is the board supporting classroom teachers with training and professional development on how they can be using this? And this isn't my second question, but kind of like a second part of this question is it also like how to actually support them with implementing it. So there's like the training, and then also something like the visual schedule app or extension that I saw you guys list there is that like implementing something like that is going to be very time intensive. So how is that being planned when we have students who are being taken out of small classes or, you know, like being integrated into regular classes? They don't have that small ratio of student to teacher anymore for teachers to create these resources. So how are we making sure that that teachers are having time to create these resources and learn about them and explore how to do the different things?
I think that first question was the one I was sorry for say. So the first question was how to educators know, right? We'll do. Okay. We work really hard to work with CERTs, work with school teams, and make sure educators know where to access and how to learn and find the information. So we have our initial tech trainers. We do professional development. We visit schools and classrooms, drop-in sessions, for example. And we try and keep staff as connected and informed as possible, using as many different ways as possible, so like newsletters, our websites. We have online educator groups, and just like, you know, not just us, but, you know, our departments, we're available, right? We're here, and we are constantly putting that message out to, you know, to all everyone, just to make sure that everyone knows that tool as much as possible. The second question I feel is a very, very broader, more special education, like ISS support question, right? The question was, how do we make sure teachers are trained in specific special education, like skills and strategies, correct? That was the sort of the question.
I don't have an example of digital schedules, but lately we've done a lot of training around Clicker. We have a lot of Clicker subscriptions going out, and usually for that, what we do is we go in and we work with the teacher so they understand how to use it. And then we revisit and we go back, and the next visit helps them support the student in the class. So one is about learning the technology itself, but then we always return visit to see how it's going. Have you been able to implement it? How can we help you implement it? Like how can we support you basically?
And that exact question is, so the whole team, right? That would be the whole ISS team and all that are involved in that particular student's needs. So that would vary so much depending on the student's needs.
Yeah, that could be like the SIP might support. So services might support. But when it comes to inclusive technology, that's what we do.
Okay. My second question was, I guess, for whoever can answer is, when we're introducing technology like this, which again is wonderful, there's so many benefits to it, is how are we making sure that the mental load involved in these accommodations aren't being downloaded unintentionally to the students through this technology? So my example would be, let's say you have a dyslexic student who needs font written out in like sans serif type font. And then they're given a print worksheet from the teacher for math where the font might be in a serif type font. And then they say, okay, well, you can just take a picture of it and use AI and it'll change it around for you. But that's a lot of extra steps for a child who already has a learning disability. So how are we making sure that that's not happening, you know, with no malintent intended from the teachers, but just where they're thinking, oh, there's this technology, it's so easy, you can do all of these things, and not realizing there's this gap here and we're actually making things harder for the students.
But yes, through you, Chair.
Yeah.
I think it really comes down to what is because we're talking about a few different aspects. A, student capacity, because there will be certain components where we ever keep up with where AI is going at this point in terms of systems and computer. But absolutely not. We're not going to be able to keep up with where industry is going at this point. We do our best, and again, we always work through approved technologies. We always work through considerations around like that approved process and specific AI and be within our AI steering committees. And so we try to look at the long-term aspect before we have to decide to recommend. So that's kind of the overarching when we look at it from a, hey, what's this really doing? What's the purpose of this? And then when we start to look at it from the actual implementation, where there's capacities of the student, and how do we build up the capacities of the student? And how does that become part of what they are doing on a daily basis? And how do we start to do that? And where's the student at in terms of it? It's also almost like that backwards chain, where we have an end goal on where we want to be able to get there, and then to be able to get them to the next step. And ultimately, once that pathway, and that's something where any of our facilitators are actually really good at being able to kind of speak with the teachers and understand exactly, so where are we trying to get to? What is the purpose of this? A lot of times we even have reach outs from schools of saying, hey, we're trying to solve this. How do we look at it from this particular perspective? Is there something that we could consider? What else do you can you come out? I don't say there were a couple of calls last week where you guys had something similar where I was like, just, hey, can you come out? Like, not last week, sorry. I'm thinking.
Yeah, I was
Right, wait, last week. It just felt like 2 or 3 weeks this week.
Yeah.
But I know the week was break. It was called like, hey, can you come out and see what we're doing? Because it's something similar in the sense of, hey, it seems like we're doing it all right and we've done it, but it isn't quite making where the students at. What are we missing? And that's it. So then that comes down to educator capacity and how do we build that educator capacity? And that's where ultimately that's where the facilitators, one of their major roles is how do they act as almost that job embedded, that mediated practice on how they are building it up side by side with the educator based on that specific student intent and need.
Allison,
Bridget.
Yes, Allison.
Okay, then,
Jessica, then. So my question is with respect to assessment for assessment purposes. And it relates to an issue that was brought forward to me as the rep for Easter Seals. If both the teacher and the child are learning the technology, so this is a child with a nonverbal child with special needs in a regular classroom, and it comes time to do assessment, and they are still both learning the technology, and assessment becomes really difficult. What options are there for the educator? In this case, the parent that brought this forward to me was that the child does not meet expectations all the way through because there wasn't an option to say unable to assess, or there wasn't a box to check off to say we're still figuring out the assessment process here. So just wondering what you would say to educators who are still learning the technology and the child is still learning the technology.
So, give you a chart. What I'd say is if it's something like our universal reading screener, like a cadence, when we're looking at that, when we've had some conversation around that. The cadence and based off of the dibbles, right? Like way back when.
I can tell you exactly what it was. It was switches. It was
Okay.
learning switches and facial eye gaze.
Yeah.
And so it was brand new to both the parent and the child.
Okay.
So is there an option for the teacher rather than checking off doesn't
So
meet expectations?
What I think about is assessment is on this, right? We should always be looking at what's most recent, what's most relevant for a student, and then determining what are we actually assessing that. So if we are trying to assess it based off of this particular tool, then what are we trying to gain from that end goal in terms of, so if it's really about learning the tool and we aren't ready for it yet, then we need to look at how we're adjusting that goal and seeing, is this the right goal at this particular time? But if it's something where we've had tremendous amount of input, again, like everybody's feeling that there's capacity in the student, there's capacity in the educator, and we're ready to assess using this as a tool, and we feel that we're okay, and it isn't quite meeting where we really are. But that's, so again, the assessment just shows, hey, we're not there, but we know the tool, we understand the tool, it was set up properly, things are happening the right way in terms of things. But if it's, then to me, the assessment stands very valid around that if there's something that's happening. But if the capacity isn't necessarily there yet, then I need to look at, again, what is the sort of assessment was come down to? What is the purpose? What are we trying to assess? How are we trying to understand what we're trying to do? And essentially, what are we trying to measure? So then my first question would be, is there another way that we can do it in this particular circumstance? And to really explore, is that kind of going back and forth and teasing out what we really lives at?
I agree. My concern for this family is that the November report card looked incredibly bleak. And it seemed to me that there ought to have been another option other than a very demoralizing set of boxes checked off that seemed to be the only option for the teacher.
I am jumping. I'll add with the context that you provided. I don't know the students, so I don't know all the specific details, but in certain circumstances, we can use on a report guide for insufficient evidence to evaluate. When you're using that, it comes alongside a conversation with family. Please know, we recognize your child's coming along, we're seeing progress, this is what we're noticing. But at this time, we don't have enough information to be able to assess. So I think there is an alternative that staff can use for exactly that reason, because it's not that it's not a no, it's a not yet, right? And so that's how we can use that in that particular context. As I said, I don't know all the details of that one, but that's certainly an option in certain cases.
Okay, so it just wasn't used in this family's case.
And again, I don't know all the details, but in circumstances we can.
Yeah, thank you. Good to know. What's next?
Yeah, Jessica, and then if anyone.
I just had a question regarding primary and junior students who don't automatically get their own personal Chromebook yet. The process that I understand it right now is the school-based OT or SLP would need to make the recommendation for the child to obtain their device. Is that correct?
Not just them, but clinicians, yeah.
So, not school-based.
No, I mean, it's just not one, this is more within the school team that can assign the advice.
Right.
Yeah, but that's it.
So then being put on the wait list to be assessed by school-based clinician, what is the time generally then that a child first, the ask from a parent to when they actually are able to receive the device? Do we have any information?
That would be more of a.
It also really depending on the need and student.
Yeah.
I mean, I've said the last 6 years, so like it really just does depend on and who's recommending it. Right? And
You mean how long
why?
until they're seen to how long they receive it? Yeah, I don't know, because we usually see the student after.
Right.
However, in a primary classroom, there should be quite a few Chromebooks in the room already, and they're not used all the time. And if there's a need, then I would advocate for the student and talk to the teacher about using it, because all of those accessibility tools are available on every phone. The only difference between a SEAC Chromebook and a classroom Chromebook is the touchscreen. And some of the classroom Chromebooks have that anyways.
With the SEAC device, do they have the option of bringing it home?
Yes.
And that differs from the classroom? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, whoever the question is for, and just concerned about the wait time, that the time being wasted essentially from the need being brought forward by their private clinician or the parent or the diagnoses to actually receiving the device and then having the tech come in to teach them how to use it, and then the child actually being able to use it. Like, what is that length of time? And then how much time has been wasted of them not being able to access it?
I have one thing just before. I just want you all to be aware too, because we didn't really say this. We go into classrooms not just to work with students that have SEA devices. We go into all classrooms. So if there's a need in the classroom, we would support it, whether or not the student had a SEA. So
You guys want to find out who can address that?
I'm gonna be honest, I don't know the answer to that question at the moment unless Connor does, but I'm happy to get in to bring it back to. I'm just not sure where we're at right now in terms of wait times. It shifts and it changes, so I don't know currently what that looks like, but I'm happy to.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Just through you, Chair.
Yeah.
I know myself coming from the school as principal, when there has been the recommendation of a SEA computer and during that lag time when it's coming in, because there are classroom computers assigned to every class, teachers prioritize that student. So we know if, say, for example, speech to text would be something, well, that's UDL, any student could, but we know that is really beneficial for that student in generating the thoughts. We would make sure a classroom computer is designated to that student right away.
Kelly's next. She doesn't have a kid.
So thank you for the presentation, and I think some of my questions might be answered, but I was thinking about more so the AI use. And I was listening to Connor's point and some of the questions before, and I was thinking about, so since we're already incorporating the AI processes to help support the students, but I was thinking about how, or is there any thought on using the AI for a better evaluation for academic skills with those students that have those needs? And then the other part is, for example, for educators to adapt the technology to evaluate those academic skills. So like, in other words, we're getting the data, we're getting information from the use that they're using it and it's helpful, but is there a way, or is there an idea of how to look at that from a broad level and create something that evaluates the use of that, like, so that it can improve those skills? That's my first question.
do you mean evaluate the use of AI? Like there's
No, like evaluate, like the improvement or like how the skills are being either increased by the use of those supportive technologies.
okay, so like what the yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that when we look at any of so we have our guidelines around artificial intelligence and our approved tools. Our two approved tools being Copilot and Gemini. Gemini basically being what we're talking student centered is our tool when we are speaking to students. There are lots of different ways that I can use in terms of, do we have mechanisms that can really measure what that will look like at this point? And we're not quite there yet. We have the guidelines that are telling us really about how we're going to use it. We're still very early days in terms of where it's being used, how we, all the different components on where that is sitting and how we are really utilizing it in a very good way. So is there a measure that we have on a skill that we are particular? So let's say, construction of a word prompt, and, really writing a strong word prompt. We have guidelines, we have things that are trying to do that, but I would then go back into where is the curriculum sitting with it as well. And ultimately, how are we using this as the tool, just as this is a tool, around how we're accessing the curriculum and how we are nuancing and how we are teaching the curriculum, and ultimately always using the new tool to essentially bring out the curriculum and tear apart, interrogate the curriculum, and really work with it as well. So I think knowing the scope of what we do, we want to continue to focus on where that curriculum focus is and then see it as the tool in terms of, so where I think AI is sometimes sitting as something that as a steering committee we have sat and we've had the conversation around it. We need to eventually we'll get to the point of, we don't start talking about the laptops that are sitting in front of a lot of us, or an iPad, right? That's not the topic of what we were talking about. It's the tool that we're using to assist. So ultimately, how do we move AI from being the topic to the tool? So that becomes just something that's very ubiquitous around there. And I think we'll see a very rapid progression with that across, I'm just going to say generally across society. But I think that is really where the next component is how we move it from the topic to the tool. Then in terms of the measurement, I think we always have to still focus back on to where those curriculum expectations are and how we're looking and using the tool to support us when we are teaching those curriculum expectations and students are demonstrating those.
Okay. Just like, sure, more.
Just, what's interesting, Kelly, is they have really clear, as Connor mentioned, really clear guidelines for educators around assessment. AI makes mistakes. So AI should not be making decisions about our students because it can take the data, summarize it, do whatever it wants with it. And then if we're putting student data in and saying, give me a sense of this, that would be inappropriate because you have no idea how it's analyzing that data, what it's doing with that data. The other thing that's key is anytime you enter student data, let's say a teacher takes something, scans in and asks AI to acknowledge that data, do something with data. You've now handed over the intellectual property of that student to AI. So it is now online for others to access. And so we're not encouraging personal student work to be uploaded and then into an AI program because then we lose the intellectual property of that. Now, if the student chooses to create that and it sits in the platform of AI, that's a different conversation. But we have to be really careful to protect that first.
Just if I could clarify, what I was looking at, I'm thinking about, because there's so much benefits that I'm hearing that through those use of the different supports is not necessarily that it's evaluating, but how, like, so actual educators using that to say, so like they're building, so they're adding into the AI to build something that says, okay, so we're seeing that some kids are reading more because of this. And so that it really keeps track of where those successes are. Because I feel like sometimes there's, like, it's great to have all the technology, but then are we being overloaded with different things and not necessarily seeing the progress for the key areas that can be enhanced, right? So if there are skills that are lagging, but they can be enhanced because of the supports, how do we look at that as a way to measure it? And I was wondering if there's any thought or discussion for educators to be thinking, okay, we're going to be taking some of that information and then creating our own, like just using it, in other words, to enhance what we're already seeing. So.
If you want to add to that?
I might be able to, I'm speaking to the secondary panel, so it might not be as applicable to the elementary level, but we have a lot of educators in the secondary panel who are starting to embrace expectation-based assessment. And so one of the ways that I've seen educators use exactly what you're asking very effectively through the AI tools is without any identifying information of students, but collating where, let's say their grade 9 English class and the different expectations that they're working throughout the year, as they grade those expectations and they have those different levels, by adding that information into the computer, these are the 10 things we've done, these have been the results. Generally, it allows them to focus on where maybe students aren't acquiring those skills. And so that's a secondary example, but I'm sure it could be given in an elementary as well to really help an educator hone in that, you know what, we are really lacking on this particular strand where students might not be excelling.
Sharon, you have one more question?
Yeah, I just had a follow-up to what Jessica had brought up. So I have like a question which I think should be easy to answer and just kind of a follow-up question to that. So in this school board, which clinicians or people specifically can recommend a SEAC plan?
So I get it through. It's all stipulated, not necessarily through DDSB. It is really about those SEAC guidelines. So the special education allocation guidelines are put out by the industry. And there's a list of those who can, I mean, I'm going to use it sense like prescribe it, that who can make that suggestion, make that recommendation, who can do that. So within our district, that would be our psychological services staff, that would be our speech and language pathologists, and then obviously our partnership with Brandon in that sense, right?
So I guess my follow-up question is the process in the school board then is it like they need to do a formal assessment to recommend it? Or is this like we can have a case conference, discuss the student's need, and then recommend it based on that to expedite the process?
Okay. So ultimately it comes down to, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the clinicians in their sense, just because they have college parameters that they have to follow in terms of, because the clinical staff or anybody recommending any SEA equipment has to be able to say that it provides essential access to the curriculum or to programming for that student. So I'm cautious because I don't have the OTPT, like any of the clinical side to be able to say what is actually required, because what I'm nervous about is if I say something around speech and language pathologists, that may be accurate for that group, but it might not be accurate for our psychologist or a psychologist. And OTPT, again, I'm not necessarily sure that, but I think it would be a lot of times there needs to be that clinical recommendation, and as a clinician, they need to feel comfortable and that they feel confident within their parameters and their professional practices, that whatever they are recommending provides that essential access to the curriculum and to the programming for that student. So I don't have, I don't have the specific that I could say in terms of that, like reaching out.
I think that the concern that I'm hearing Jessica bring up, which as the Grandview representative, I feel like I can speak to and kind of echo, is some of the, at least like the school-based rehab clinicians, the waitlist to see them are very long right now, right? Like speech language, it's over 4 years. So the example that she brought up that's kind of coming into my head, and there's many other examples, let's say we have a student in JK who's enrolling, who hasn't been flagged before for whatever reason, and they're a non-speaking autistic student. And they get diagnosed while they're in JK, and then they're now on an Ontario Autism Program funding waitlist, which currently sits at about 5 years in order to get funding. So that means they're going to be at a minimum in grade 3 before the family gets any funding to purchase equipment for them, including something like an iPad and paying for a very expensive app to teach them, like an AAC app, right? To teach them how to communicate. That is a very long gap for families. Now, if there's a similar gap that exists through SEAC claim, where students are put on a multi-year wait list in order to get, if the process is to get a formal assessment before this equipment can be recommended for them. I mean, it's great if the school can make it work where they can use an iPad at school, but for something essential like communication, if that device can't follow them home for consistency in all environments, how are we actually supporting this child with their communication? Because then we only have maybe 50% of their day where they're actually accessing instruction. The family can't support them with it. The family is going to have to be using different methods. And this child is sitting here in limbo. So as all of the adults around the table, like this, to me, like just flagged a really major gap that's existing for, this is like one example of one type of student, but there's many types of students where this might be like a huge barrier for them. So I guess maybe finding out the details about what exactly is the requirement for accessing SEA devices, and what is the wait time right now for the difference, because you guys can't control the Grandview wait list, but for the school-based services that exist.
Correct. We can't control that outside of our scope, but the wait times for our own access to our own clinicians is not that long. Again, changing, but it's definitely much shorter. And so I think the key there is how can we support the students internally as well in terms through that process. So it really is about connecting the student with school and then referral to internal clinicians for next steps. So the wait times between what I wanted to clearly articulate there is the wait time, but there's a difference between the wait time from here's my assessment, the recommendation for the device arrives, I get my training, I'm ready to go. That's the wait time that I'm not sure on, that I'm happy to bring back, but our clinical wait time is very different than that. It's not that long.
So you had a question?
Yeah, and I'm going to change directions all here altogether because I just look at, great technology, as far as this is concerned, but I'm sitting here with an Android 9 and an iPad, basically 5, if you wish. Okay. None of that stuff works. Okay. Just to say. So I'm really, I'm just wondering what is our sort of refresh strike that's sort of ordered, because we know that, student X got their SEA equipment and now the stuff is coming out would be really helpful. So what is our refresh time as far as that? But I also know the ministry doesn't fund their technology appropriately as well. Like I'm talking about for the regular use of any students is there. So what is our refresh time on our equipment? SEA equipment, or just general? In general, like Chromes and stuff, because we're looking at.
I can speak to that.
Yeah.
Chromebooks have an end.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything to do with purchasing, but I know that there is a deal made that they're just refreshed at the end of life. So until a Chromebook reaches its end of life, it receives all the updates. Once it reaches end of life, it's replaced with a new one.
But that also includes OS time, because I know, like I said, mine can no longer be upgraded, so nothing can happen to it.
Right. So the Chromebooks,
Yeah.
the operating systems get updated regularly. And actually, if you have a student at home that's having any difficulties with their Chromebook, ask them to update them. They should update automatically, but occasionally they get stuck and they don't.
Well, no, I'm just saying this one can no
No,
longer.
that's
that.
So our iPads are refreshed more regularly than you would think.
Your past your end was life.
It's just a while I know. I used to pray at press, you don't have a piece of tape on your screen. No, but the iPads and Chromebooks are refreshed regularly enough if they always have the most recent. So all of our iPads have iOS 18. And all of our Chromebooks have the most recent operating system, which is 172 point something.
Yeah.
It's also important because, as we know, we are in a world of cybersecurity. So being able to make sure that we have all protocols that are tied, that the devices that we have our students on and that our staff are accessing are up to date, are fortified, who have all the right things. So that's why that is a major driving factor as well around why we want to make sure that students and everybody are using devices that have all the good stuff and to be updated. So.
I just have a couple of more so comments than questions. We talked about how the parents, children getting SEA equipment are informed of a number of these things. But a lot of kids have these devices as well. I'd love to see personally all parents get some of these tips, especially the securing of the phones, like for specific apps and things. I mean, if there's a way to just sort of a parent bulletin of some sort. Did you know? Because I think that's useful information for any parent. So that was sort of comment number one. The other one was, we know that grade 7s, grade 10, they're getting their Chromebooks regardless. I would like to see classes in grade 7, all of the students be taught, like a facilitator, somebody going into the classroom and doing that. Is that something we're doing?
We do that with 7s and 8s.
Okay.
8s going to high school. We have to go to high school. We have to get ready for high school. But 7s, obviously we can't get into all the grade 7 classrooms,
Right.
But we did prepare a document for educators called the first 20 days with your Chromebook, which goes out to all grade 7 teachers. And it walks them through like a daily lesson they can do and short little lessons they can do with their students to teach them about features on their Chromebooks.
Okay.
Not just accessibility, but
That's the single best thing that DDSB did for access or for universal design for learning, right? And for equity is to provide those to all the students. Is one of the things I was very happy to see. So yeah, that stuff's going on. That's great. It's been a fantastic presentation. If there was any more questions, because I know we could probably all think of lots of questions, but keeping in mind the time, feel free to send Lisa an email and she can either Lauren Congress, if you want to answer them or to get the answer from the facilitators. Okay.
I used like a copy of the first 20 days of your Chromebook for me, please.
Yeah, thank you.
That would be very.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll grab it tomorrow.
Okay, moving on to the business arising from the minutes. We have a note here for the role of trustee and its relation to special education. Oh, yeah, that was the discussion we were having about the possibility of a letter to the ministry. As we know, there's talk about the ministry possibly doing away with the role of trustee and creating a parent, I don't know if it's an advocacy office, what that's supposed to look like. And of course, anybody who's ever dealt with ministry office probably knows how well that works out. And the concern that I think a lot of parents, especially kids with special education needs, are concerned about is losing that local point of contact and that person that's really accountable to their community, right? Because we elect our trustees in our community. So they're reaching out to them for assistance and who are often very knowledgeable about the very schools and the board policies that they're dealing with, which central office, I would find that difficult to believe that they would have that sort of intimate knowledge that everything is needed. So we talked about whether or not this was something that we wanted as a SEAC to address with ministry or not. And I will just throw that back out there to the group for their thoughts. Thoughts? Yeah, Kelly?
I'm a trustee, so I'm really, but I wanted to say that you could ask some really good questions because that is like what, in terms of the support and that the community aspect that you said, maybe positioning some of the response as key questions, like what, or what, like maybe thinking about from the SEAC perspective, what would we lose or what would be different or what is needed? Like it's almost like reiterating why those roles are vital, but asking real questions back to the ministry, to get some answers. Even if we don't get the answers we're looking for, I think posing the question shows from the SEAC advisory committee that level of interest and seriousness about it, because we are community-based organization. So I think it's important to be putting people with questions.
I mean, I think it's worth addressing it, especially with the last information I think I heard about it was that at least in the school boards that have already been assigned a supervisor, they're requiring the boards to pay for the supervisor's salary, which I believe was about $350,000. So when we're talking about not having enough funds for certain programs and student supports and creating a huge expenditure like that, that's definitely a concern. And I think the SEAC voice is really valuable to advocate for our students and their needs and where that money could be differently spent.
Yeah, and yes, yeah.
In addition to that, like you had mentioned, the all of the benefits of the Chromebook program, to my knowledge, and other school boards who are currently being overseen by a supervisor, those programs have been paused. So that would also be a concern if that were happening in other boards as well, because as you said, that really is a great addition for universal design for learning. And to pause those programs or to remove them would be taking away something that is like fundamental to many students and helpful for other students.
Yeah, well, and most importantly, not feeling like they're standing out like a sore thumb in an age where that's important to them, really important to them. So, any other thoughts?
Can I just comment? Yeah, it's just as far as $350,000 that they are plus an additional $80,000 for I think 40,000 for basically expenses, 80,000 for expenses, and $40,000 for I forget what, so it's actually more than that. And as far as, this board with 12 trustees, it's approximately 240,000 that we spend on trustees honorariums, and for 12. But the other thing is that when it comes to it's a different role that we are elected and we advocate on behalf of our community, and we are not supervised by. They are now putting in each board by September, but these supervised boards have to have it actually supposed to be January 1st, I believe. We're supposed to have a parent and student support office. But those are staffed by staff, and recognizing that they are not third party people, and so it has a different context when you're trying to look at a particular issue, and you're looking at more of a holistic context from a trustee's point of view, whereas staff will be limited as far as that's concerned. So there's huge concerns from that perspective. I just, and again, the supervisors said the supervised boards, there has been good decisions like equipment that is being made. And the reason why Chromebooks happened in this board, it was a decision of previous board of trustees that said that we want to prioritize and put money into Chromebooks. And so what that did was actually this board was very much in a better position when COVID happened, because we did have those. And I know the trauma board was going like crazy because they didn't have that so it's those types of things, those decision-making things that happen. And that supported the growth and the support of the board. But the other thing that really bothers me as well is that the funding, that's where we really delve into the funding and how it is received. It's not like I just look at Chromebooks and stuff like that. They're not being supported in the current funding model. The upgrades and the maintenance are not being supported in the current funding model, and which is really crucial to support, especially our students. So it's been, again, our board in particular, now I know other boards as well, but we have put priority in the funding model, and you're now going to lose that. So again, it's very much we support the advancement and achievement. It's still we're supporting by putting whatever funding we can, particularly support the special education advisory committees and students that have needs. So by putting in other people, we basically just got staff talking to staff, and I know that when our staff do look into other things, we always bring outside agencies, outside voice, because that's where you get a better end result, because people have different perspectives bring together. And that's what the trustees bring around, their different perspectives from their different communities. So, and plus we're not obligated to, as I said, we're not under contract of the business of the board, right?
So really what it comes down to is whether or not somebody wants to make a motion to write one. Probably one of the associations to do that. But yeah. That
I'll make the motion. I would love someone to write it.
okay, I'm happy to work with you on that. Yeah, great. So second, all in favor? Motion is passed. Okay, perfect. Updated gifted listening sessions. We have a meeting coming up next Tuesday, and I'll pass it to Joe.
Evening again, everyone. So I'm happy to bring forward an update on gifted listening sessions. So last meeting, a call was put out. I think sitting right here, I put that call out for a working group from everyone sitting around the table to join and help to develop a set of questions and prompts that we can then provide to students as part of the gifted listening sessions. When we think about who we are looking to get and hear voice and experience from, that would include students who are identified as virtually gifted in special education classes, in regular classes with indirect support, both the elementary and secondary level. It also include families and caregivers of those students, and then staff as well who support. So there's a lot of people that we'd like to hear from and have their voices, the opportunity for them to include their voices should they wish. So right now the scope is been narrowed, and the first group that we're looking to connect with are elementary students who are in self-contained special education classes that serve students who identify as intellectually gifted. That would include 6 schools across our board at the elementary level. And the first meeting I thought was really positive. It was held virtually. And I really appreciate too the people who volunteered to be part, or who are volunteering to be part of this working group and giving up your time to volunteer for this work, because it was, we asked for the volunteers at the last SEAC meeting, and then we held it right for the holidays when like life is really busy for a lot of people. So I really want to just put out there to space, like, thank you for giving us time. As mentioned, we are going to meet again Tuesday, and for the group, the intention was to meet in person where we can find a space here at the board office. I was, as we mentioned right at the beginning of the meeting, wanted to know just in general if we're okay to continue with the in-person, or if going virtual would be better. For me personally, I'm here anyways, but I know with weather, with the commitments, with commuting, with all the things, that virtual can often be just be more inclusive, like just allowing for people to access. So we don't have to have that discussion now based on time, but I can send out an email and just kind of gauge a sentiment of the working group and the members of they would prefer. And I'm easy to go and happy to go with it either way. And the work as it stands right now is an update. Next meeting, we hope to finalize the prompts that will be used at listening sessions, and then see if there are those who are interested in finalizing survey questions, because the intention is to go in, engage in meaningful conversation with students, gather their sentiments and ideas about their experiences around what gifted education looks like for them, and then provide follow-up if that's sort of the interest, and spark that interest, and get an interest and follow up with a survey as well. That can be distributed later for those who are not feeling comfortable to speak up in front of everybody else, so that everyone can have their voice included. And that is where things stand in terms of timelines of getting those sessions happening. I have an ambitious timeline of getting it done before the end of January, which we'll see where that stands when I report back in a month from now. But that's the ambitious schedule. So we'll see how that goes. Other than that, that's my update.
Any questions?
Sorry, I was away the last meeting, so I'm sorry if this has been asked and answered, but it should be super quick. Are there changes being planned? So I know this is a response to some of the changes like last year or the year before with the gifted program enrollment, but are there changes being planned for the upcoming September enrollment based on any of this? Like, is something trying to be implemented before that or for the year after?
So the purpose of the listening session is really just to gather and understand the experience of students who are identified as gifted and being served through gifted programming and IP here, and looking for ways to take best practices, scale those across the system, and bring those forward. I think that in terms of anything for like the process, it was determined last meeting that we're talking about bringing it into alignment. Oh, so we just talked about at last meeting, bringing the process into alignment, the IPRC process into alignment with other
It's done at the IP.
with others.
Yeah.
with other exceptionalities.
Yeah.
So, but the purpose of the listening sessions themselves are really just to gather information, gather voice, gather experience, understand what it looks like, feels like for our students who are both in self-contained special education classes and regular classes within merit support at the elementary and high school level. Look for those best practices. How can we scale those so that everyone is getting the best experience possible that we can provide, and look for areas of improvement. Okay, so that's the listening sessions.
We had a great conversation last meeting, Shauna and me, that actually had some slides that will give you some information about conversations of some language changes, some considerations for placement decisions this year. No intention of moving outside of IPRC process, and so that is what changed. But I would be happy to sit down and walk you through, because you can watch the CF presentation, but I'm also happy to just, if you want to connect again, and I can walk you through some of the bits and pieces if you want. Because it was about a 20-minute, it was a long conversation.
I wasn't sure if it was in the minutes or something, but just about like that you're currently using, I think it was the CCAT, and it's showing like 20%, and that's changed over the past.
Yeah, we went from 2%, I believe it was in 2016 to, or 12% last year, and 12% again this year.
Okay, so I guess I was just wondering, and maybe it was talked about, and we can talk separately about it, is if there's gonna like a change to the process, I guess, where it's like maybe we're not just using the CCAT and there's going to be like a teacher evaluation form to go with it, or a psych assessment that goes with it, or something else to kind of inform the gifted identification, I guess, to reduce pressure on class size.
There was conversation. None of those changes. So those are the conversations, not changes. Nothing there is changing in the current process.
Okay.
But there was conversation that came up the table that.
Okay.
Did speak. Yeah. No,
wondering if there was.
It's a great question, and it did speak to that. So I'm happy to do some of that comments.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Just to add on to yours a little bit, did have a discussion with president of ABC and vice president talk about it. They're in agreement. 12% is not real. Like, it's not, definitely not. And the agreement in the alignment of the idea of maybe be testing the kids in the 98th and 90% of, like, doing the 98 on the list, as opposed to the ones below that. Given the history of why it was just offered at CCAP. Right, and mentioning that the Toronto board, I believe, has policy that stated with their review or with their screening process, that if there's any indication that a student is studied for the CCAT, they're disqualified for that reason. So that's something to be thinking about, because we do know that the WISC is the indicator of giftedness, not the CCAT, right? So we maybe look at changing those parameters and just putting it out there that this is the process, right? We do the CCAT. If you're scoring in the 98 enough, we do this WISC. We refer you to this. Anybody else who wants to do WISC privately underneath that, it's welcome to do that on their own. Right, so that's something to be considered as well. But also, maintaining the idea that and it can just be one information session held at the board office that talks about the program and what it is and what it isn't. Right? And to make sure that parents are understanding that this is not a placement for a better learning experience, that it is a placement of need for specific reasons, and understanding what those reasons. Right? Because I think so helping dispel some of those misconceptions around what the gifted placement is and what it is. Because I think that's a large part of why we're seeing that spread for the CCAT that's currently happening, which given the numbers, it's clear it's happening, right? So just to add to some of the stuff that we had talked about, but happy to have a more detailed conversation with you about our policy. Any other questions with respect to that? Okay, then we're moving on to the update for the February 10th Special Education Parent Caregiver Symposium here at the board.
And that's me. A quick update. I know I brought forward last meeting, February 10th, 6 to 8 p.m. Special Education Parent Caregiver Symposium. Wanted to just give you a few updates on where we're at. Registration, if you have a student, if you're a parent or a caregiver of a student in DDSB, you will shortly, in the next few days, receive information about how to register for the event. What we're going to do is get a general sense of registration and interest. You'll be able to sign up for the individual sessions afterwards. So we'll get you to register. And once you're registered, then we'll send you all the session options where you can sign up and pick the ones you want to go to. You'll be able to visit, parents and caregivers will be able to visit 3 different sessions in the evening. And I'll just give you a quick again for those that maybe weren't here last time. Right now, the sessions are listed as the IPRC process, secondary pathways for students, understanding supports available in both elementary and in secondary for students being supported through ISS. Alternative learning opportunities in secondary, so a little bit about SAL, DAS, and credit recovery and what that looks like. We had a request at a previous SEAC to add a session on student safety at school, really talking about the safety plan and how it's used in the school space. IEPs and the collaborative approach between school and family and those creation of those IEPs. Understanding the placement options in DDSB, the 5 placements that we offer here, supporting so we originally had asked the same team that came here to see and did our presentation on supports in kindergarten to come back and present again. And so they're scheduled, the technology team is going to come back as well. We've added a few since the last time I was at the table. We're going to have our MLL team join us as well. Our teachers of deaf, hard of hearing, teachers of blind, low vision, social work services, psych services, and speech language will also be running sessions. So if you're interested in learning about what does supports look like in our system, what are wait times, what's the referral process, they'll have sessions there as well. What's exciting is we have reached out. I just wanted to give you a sense of the community partners we reached out to, because they'll not all confirmed, but we've reached out to the following associations. So Association for Bright Children, Autism Ontario Durham, Durham Down Syndrome Association, Easter Seals, Grandview, Learning and Disabilities Association of Durham Region, Ontario Parents of Visually Impaired Children, Circle of Support, Kinnar, Chimo, Frontenac, Lake Ridge Community Services, Lake Ridge Health, Transition to Work Team, which works alongside Joe, and that's speaking to pathways for students beyond high school. Ontario Shores, Community Living Ajax, Community Living Oshawa, and Community Living Durham North. The Ability Center, Grandview, Durham Women's Multicultural Center, our Indigenous Education Team, Holland Bloorview, Muslim Women's Community Supports, Resources for Exceptional Children, and Developmental Services Ontario. So a lot of we've sent lots of feelers out, so we're hoping to have as many community partners join as possible to support families and they'll be able, so those will be tables that'll be set up in the central area here. So it's a 2-hour session. You have 3 half-hour sessions that you can visit. You'll have an additional half hour. You can just, whenever you're ready, sort of mingle and connect. That's that one, yeah. Would you be able to send me the list of the April sessions that are available? So when you register, and then you'll get every session and a description of what's happening in that session.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, even if I can't attend, I can register just to see, because I'm not gonna be able to attend.
Okay. Okay. And we haven't quite finished all the descriptions because what we need to do, what we want to do is create a very clear outline for parents so that when they read it, they know this is what I'm coming for and I want to register for that. So we're just working on finalizing the specifics of those details, but just register. It's okay if you don't come, but you'll be able to access the. Cool.
Any other questions?
Oh, yes, we're having a CF table.
Oh, is that okay?
But we want an actual CF table too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, excellent. So, and we're not gonna have a problem registering on if we don't have kids in the DAs.
You know what we'll do? We'll send registration links to SEAC. We'll send them links so that you're not a parent caregiver, but you can send
Okay.
Yeah, it's just,
Just
sorry,
that's-
you can, anyone can register, but you won't get the invitation because it'll be set up through School
Right.
Messenger.
Okay,
So I'll just make sure that it gets out to SEAC as well.
okay. Perfect. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to association reports and committee reports. Does anybody have any association reports? Okay. Moving on then to correspondence, we did get Durham Catholic School Board sent a letter off to the ministry supporting our October 29th, 2025 letter regarding the timing of the release of the core education funding and sort of backing up our concerns around the timing, transparency, our ability to actually provide meaningful input on the budget process. We haven't received a response from ministry, so.
We're on session, so. And it's already late, at March 23rd, they don't come back, to session on March 23rd, which is absolutely ridiculous, but that's.
Yeah, I think it's something like 54 days this year, sitting. Yeah. Yes. Anyway, just, that's what that came in on. Any questions? Respect to that? We all stand in the same spot. We didn't get any submissions for community concerns. Just a reminder that if you have anybody to bring for a concern, to just send an email off to Lauren and Lisa and copy myself, just so that they can make sure they have the answer for the meeting instead of having to come back at the next meeting, because that's a month difference kind of thing sometimes. Celebrations and successes. Do we have any?
I don't have an Adam story, I have a James story.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I'm just typing my children all over the place, sorry. So my youngest, so I volunteer for CADS, which is the Medium Adaptive Snow Sport program. I'm running at Burncombe, and James has been helping me for the last couple of years. Officially, because he's grade 9 now, he gets to officially start collecting his community hours already with that. And he has officially gotten his own lime green jacket from the association, and he's going to be actually starting and taking his level 1 CADS instructor course in next week. So he'll be old enough to help with that process. So super proud of him for that. So baby.
Yes, I have one. My daughter, who is also the alternate on this committee, had a baby over Christmas. So I'm So I'm gonna have to find a new alternate because I don't imagine she'll. Anytime soon.
As long as you can come, we're good for now. She's still there. Oh, that's fantastic. That's huge. Beautiful. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead. So Donna's wonderful daughter Victoria made, I should probably pass it around. She did her own wreaths, but they were all through close pins, but they're quite detailed. Oh, that's, yeah, it's like Christmas wreaths. It's really cool. Oh, that's awesome. For her, that's really, really pretty.
Well, this is the thing where, I think previously you might have seen the gnomes that she has done as well. So we're looking at.
I feel like the silver stocking.
Yes, I've been seeing the gnome girl. There's a gnome wreath in there. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So I replaced our Christmas stockings.
So, but one of the things is that, as I said, employment is a huge thing. So we've been trying different things and stuff to do. There's a second one. It might be the other way. And so we've been looking at things for her to do in order to, and that's the thing is that, what can she do and looking at for supporting employment as far as that's concerned. Because employment, trying to get employment has been very, very difficult. But also to keep her active and so forth. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. That's really great. It's really great talent.
And as I said, it's minimal help. She did, I helped paint because it's 206 pens on it. But you know, she does the majority of it, you know, as far as the stuff is concerned. So that's saying, oh yeah, but no, I could no it's something.
She's on social media. Well, exactly. I think of the young man with the socks,
Yes,
right? That's what I think of, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's a entrepreneurial spirit.
Exactly. And then, well, yeah, it was the multi socks, and he ended up getting here to go to buy his socks, and he's the person with Down syndrome, right? Remember? And he ended up like he's
Very well taking care of himself. So
yeah,
that's fantastic. Well, I have some exciting news. My daughter said yes to the dress. Oh. Yeah. So all the things are falling into place for June. So busy. Yeah, it's busy, very busy. But yeah. So, all right, on that happy note from everybody. Our next SEAC meeting is February 5th, right here. Motion for adjournment. Sarah, seconders. Shauna, all in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you. They still let us, forward. So thank you. Still live.